There were many razor-sharp and very interesting encounters played in the 2013 British Chess Championship, which didn't quite make it to Game of the Day, or indeed Game of the Event. One such game will be my Game of the Month for September from the BCM. Hello everyone, this is Andrew Martin reporting. Now this game comes from round 8 in the British Chess Championships, and it's an extraordinarily complicated game between Danny Gormally playing white and Chris Ward playing black. The players, both grandmasters, in round 8 could really use a win at this stage of the tournament, and the sharpness of the game reflected that need. Gormally obviously came to the game very well prepared because he confronts Chris Ward in one of his favourite variations, the sharp Blumenfeld gambit. With this move, black offers a pawn, and in return he hopes to get a broad centre and possible open lines on the queen side. The normal move, if white wishes to decline the gambit, is bishop g5, and there's nothing wrong with that, but clearly Gormally came to the game well prepared and decided to accept the gambit pawn with d takes e6, which black is reasonably happy with, as after f takes e6 he's looking forward to playing d5 very soon. Well, white takes on b5, and now there are several options for black. Clearly black can play d5 immediately. I've seen bishop b7 mentioned in some textbooks. In fact, I think this was the move recommended by Lev Albert in this position. But Ward sticks with the traditional move a6, again offering some bait to white in return for open lines. What Gormally could have expected that move. He captured, black recaptured with the bishop, and now it looks like it's going to be defence all the way for white for quite some time to come. White's got an extra pawn, but he's got to subject himself to this period of defence. But in fact there's more to the white position than that, as he relies on a well-timed e2, e4 to break up the black centre. So white is all the time looking to prepare that move, or maybe even execute it as soon as possible. Therefore knight c3 makes sense, and now Ward simply develops in order to get castled. g3. Well, I suppose white could play e4 immediately, but that of course allows black to take on f1, and after that it takes white a little bit of time to get his king to safety. So Gormally just prefers solid development and asks black to prove his compensation. Well, here we are, d5, and now comes rook e1, which is the standard move in this position, and as you can see, white's leading up to e4. And this now is quite an interesting situation. As Ward plays a novelty here, he puts his king into the corner. It doesn't look like an especially good move in this position, so let's review the alternatives. Well, the standard moves here are simply to move the queen. Black can either play queen to d7, or black can play queen to e8. Both of these moves have been tried. After queen to d7, quite a promising move for white here looks to be bishop h3. So possibly, going back, queen e8 is the superior move, and then we get the typical sequence, knight coming into g5, bishop d8, and then the central break e4. I'm pretty sure that most players would prefer to be white in this position after d4 and now the thematic e5, opening up pressure not only in the centre but along the e-file and on the long diagonal. As possible further alternatives for black in this critical position, may I suggest rook to b8, which looks pretty sensible to me, just getting the rook into active play, getting it off the long diagonal, or possibly even h6, just stopping knight g5 for good. But that might be a little bit slow, and white seems to be able to work up good play here with bishop h3, queen d7, and now e4. And the point of this is that after d4 we can play knight d5, taking advantage of the position of black's queen. So all in all, this looks like a very critical position, and one where white may be better. Ward plays king h8, and naturally Gormally gets on the case immediately, hitting at that weak spot in black's position, the e6 pawn, by playing knight g5 and then bishop h3. And this forces an unwelcome concession from black. He has to retreat his knight, to the back rank, which is not really what black wants at this stage. And this allows Gormally to put into practice the main point of his whole position, e4. d4 was played by Ward, and now e5. So with powerful play, I think Gormally has established a pretty sizable advantage out of this opening. The position's complicated, to be sure, but it's hard to see compensation for black, as not only has white fractured the central formation, he seems to be getting a very strong initiative to boot. And Ward's next move doesn't really inspire confidence, but I guess you could say it was the point, the curious point, of king to h8. He wants to retreat his knight to g8. Of course, black's d-pawn has got to be respected here, as well as possible pressure along the diagonal towards white's king. It's hard to form the impression, though, that white isn't anything other than better here. Now, just dropping back, could black start exchanging pieces with d takes c3? Well, obviously then white takes on f6, black takes on d1 because his queen's unprotected, and now white flicks in f takes g7. And we get a forcing sequence here where a lot of pieces are coming off the board, and now black plays c takes b2. Well, if black could find the time for c4, c3 here, then I think he'd be in very good shape. But white doesn't allow him that time, and I think with the accurate rook b1, rook b8, and now rook d2, knight f7, and then bishop e7, white establishes a very big advantage in this endgame. Not only has he got two bishops, he's got an extra pawn as well. So going back to e5, that variation, by the way, was long, but it's absolutely within the calculation range of both grandmasters. That's why I think black plays knight g8 in this position. And Gormally now puts his knight on e4, which is a pretty straightforward move, maintaining the pressure and setting up maybe queen to h5. Just dropping back, though, there was also another attractive move here in knight to a4. And the tactical point of this move can be revealed after rook b8, when white has the nice trick, knight takes c5, bishop takes c5, and now queen to c2, with a double attack on the bishop and the pawn h7. But I think after knight a4, black can improve on this with queen to b5, and this could give white more problems in justifying the position of his offside knight. Nevertheless, after b3 just stabilising, again I think white is better. Black can take on g5 and play bishop b7, but now white just plays neutralising moves with bishop g2. Takes, knight f7, bishop f4. Well, again, we're reaching a standard type of position where white's a pawn up, and there's significant pressure to come against this pawn on c5. So Danny, I think, could have played that way, but you know, you can see why he plays knight ce4, just keeping that knight in nice central play. Well, Ward jabs at the knight on g5. Out comes the white queen, and now Chris plays bishop to b7, again with ideas of creating pressure along the long diagonal. Possibly bishop c4 was more pointed here, because it forces white to think about the a2 pawn. If white plays a3, then bishop d5. But this way round, of course, black can't put his bishop and queen on the long diagonal so easily and threaten mate. Nevertheless, this was an alternative for black. But Ward plays bishop b7. White goes bishop g2. And now the rook comes up to f5. And this is where the game starts to get very baffling, as Gormally plays the excellent move here, f4. And the pieces are on extremely odd squares. Now, it's pretty clear that the complications were taking their toll on both players' clocks here, because I remember seeing this game as it was being played, and both players were using up quite a bit of time on this very complicated situation. And naturally here, Ward decides to get one of the important attacking pieces off the board with bishop takes g5. He could also have tried bishop d5 in this position, and after b3, g6. This, of course, is an extremely risky procedure. Black wins a piece, but he leaves himself vulnerable to a really vicious white attack, which continues with g4. And after rook f8, f5. Possibly both players looked at such a continuation during the game, and again, one can see why Chris Ward would find this sort of thing unattractive, as white is having all the fun after e takes f5, knight takes g5. I'm not sure I see too many good moves for black in this position. For instance, if he takes on g5, we can take on g5, check, and then take on d5, check, king g7, g takes f5. Despite black's extra piece, his king is about to be laid waste. And going back to knight takes g5, if black plays knight h6 here, we have the nice interjection, e6. And after queen e8, a further excellent blocking move here with knight f7. So that, after knight d takes f7, e takes f7, knight takes f7, we have bishop takes d5. The position, rather bafflingly, has opened up, and white once again has regained all the material he sacrificed and retains a vicious attack. So that's why I think Ward, you know, when you're coming into time trouble, you want to play straightforward moves. He gets rid of that annoying knight, and Danny takes back with the pawn. Queen to d5. It's coming true. Black is getting that pressure on the long diagonal. If he takes on f5 in e5 in this position, then we get bishop f4. And after rook f5, knight d6. Possibly this is the move that Chris Ward didn't want to see on the board. And after rook takes f4, knight takes b7, rook f5, white has knight takes c5 in this position, with a discovered attack against the rook on a8. Okay, it's a rather complicated position after rook takes g5, queen e2, but I think white's just the exchange up here and should be able to repel any confusing tries by black. So going back to the game, Chris plays queen to d5, g4, making the position even more complicated, and after rook takes e5, Danny played the straightforward move bishop f4. But that might not be best in this position. I think possibly Gormally was also feeling the pressure. Much better for white, and maintaining the attack and advantage here, was the excellent queen to g6. And this puts really strong pressure on black, even stronger than before, as after h takes g5, bishop takes g5, knight f7, bishop f4, white keeps all his advantages and surrounds the rook on e5. The point is that after rook f8, black can again sacrifice things, but queen h5, knight h6, rook f1 should nail down the position for white. Let's just see the game though. Bishop f4, knight comes to f6, again a bafflingly complicated move. That knight's immune, he can't be taken anyway. Queen to g6, and now possibly the clock again played a significant part in this game as Chris Ward makes his final mistake. Rook takes g5. What he should have played is rook takes e4, and that move would have actually forced Danny to find a really good move in reply, as you can see, black has threats of his own. Yes, white would have had to find the extraordinary move here, rook to e2, just to stay on the board. And then we get a very interesting position still after queen d7, rook takes e4, h takes g5, bishop takes g5, and then, believe it or not, the position burning out after multiple trades on e4, and then queen to c6, with remarkably an endgame coming up where material is level. Perhaps white has a slight edge here with the bishop over the knight, but again in this endgame, the power of the pawn on d4 has to be respected. Well, but in this very confusing situation, you can understand why Chris Ward makes this mistake. Bishop takes g5, h takes g5, and now rook f1. That is the problematic point of the whole position. With rook f1, black cannot take on e4 because it's mate on f8. So now it's much more straightforward. White's threats are too strong. After d3, we have the crunching move rook takes f6, g takes f6, and now Danny finishes nicely with the simple queen to h6 check. Well, that could easily have been game of the day for that particular round, and was a contender for game of the event. In the end, there were a few mistakes towards the end, but we can forgive the players. All in all, this was a highly entertaining and very sharp struggle.